Welcome. What is up, everybody? We are Your Fielder's Choice, and it is week 4. I am John Maffa. I'm joined by Mike Mislinski and Devin Frank, and we are here ready to get you guys ready and primed for the NFL week 4. Boys, kind of crazy to believe, but we're basically a quarter of the way through the season. It's gone kind of fast. Some weeks kind of sweaty, but here we are.
Pretty crazy. It goes so fast. It's ridiculous.
I know the days feel long, but the weeks go by pretty quickly.
Right. Totally.
And like you said, Miz, this is like where we start putting, how'd you phrase it? Rubber to pavement. We're starting to get some data that we can make some real decisions on. Teams are kind of starting to settle into their own. We're not basing it off of the prior year before. Just overall, things are starting to be in motion here. The good teams are starting to distance themselves from the pack. The bad teams are staying there at the bottom. So yeah, overall, all good stuff. We'll get you into some stuff here, but before we do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't point you over to our website, yourfielderschoice.com. We got a great special going on right now. $25 a month for the first 2 months. That gives you everything. Access to the Discord with the premium channels where you can talk to guys like Miz and Devin, ask them direct questions. We got access to cheat sheets, which is something that has become more of a necessity over the years as DFS becomes more popular. And we do all the niche sports too. It's not just NFL, MLB, NBA. We got esports on there, Korean baseball, you name it, we got it. European soccer leagues, everything. So head on over to yourfielderschoice.com and check it out. Let's jump into some plays here. This is how this is going to work, guys. We're going to go over some cash plays. We're going to go over some GPP plays, do a little bit of a summary, and then get you guys out of here ready to go about an hour before lock. So before we do that, I'm going to actually change the title because it's a CFB, but I'll let Dev take us away and talk about some of his cash plays at the quarterback position this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got, this is a good week at quarterback. Some interesting pricing between the two sites. We'll start with the obvious play that's going to be the most popular, and that's Josh Allen. Josh Allen, everybody was, especially us, we're all over in week 1. He was a bit of a dud. Week 2 started to look better. And then last week he went nuts, reminded everybody just how good he is, especially from a fantasy perspective. This week he gets, a bad Houston team. They have the highest implied total on the board. And if you're worried about a blowout, remember, this is the NFL. This isn't, college football where backups are coming in at halftime in a Bama game or whatever. If it's a blowout, that means Josh Allen made it a blowout because this offense, everything runs through him. They don't run the ball a ton. Even in the red zone, a lot of times he's the one carrying the ball. So don't worry about a blowout in terms of Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, you pay up. I really like him on FanDuel at 8.5 because the gap between him and some of the other guys really isn't big enough that it's going to make that huge of a difference. Over on DraftKings, though, there's a play that Miz and I are very high on, and that's Jalen Hurts coming in at 6.9. We project him third highest ownership at the moment. Dak is 200 cheaper and projects a little bit higher ownership against than Hurts does, but gets a Carolina team that's only allowed 191 total yards per game. Granted, they haven't played much of anybody yet, but this is a pretty legit defense. And the Cowboys have been, flip of a coin game plan wise. They really have been taking what the defense has given them. So if Carolina decides we're going to stop Dak, then the Cowboys are going to run the ball. So that gives me a little hesitation with Dak, whereas Hurts, everything Philly does runs through him. He's averaging 60 yards on the ground per game. He's averaging 260 yards through the air. He has the same amount of touchdowns as Dak does. And he gets the KC defense that's allowing 430 yards total offense. So that's over almost 250-yard difference between KC and Carolina's defense. Plus, I think, most people believe that KC they really need to win this game. They're going to get ahead. Hurts is going to be playing from behind. So that's a really good game script for him. So really like Hurts on DraftKings at 6.
And we spoke about this too on the Wednesday show, right? Like, you may sweat it out with Hurts. Like, he starts slow. I think like last week on the Monday night game, and I only know this because I haven't been season long, but he had like 8 points going into the fourth quarter. and you're like, what's going on? I kind of regret playing him. And then, lo and behold, by the end of the game, he's got like 20, 25 points. And, because he's got his legs and he can, the team in Philadelphia is not all that great. So if they're in these shootouts or they're just climbing, clawing and scraping from behind like they have been in recent weeks, I think Hurts is definitely an easy way to go here, especially against that Kansas City defense, who has shown that they're not really that good,
No.
at least as of the last 4 weeks. And then, back to your Josh Allen call originally, he started slow. People may have been off him in the beginning, but I think, he's really coming to his own the last couple of weeks here. He's just been a lightning rod. Definitely won some people some money last week if you played him in any format, GPP or cash. But yeah, I agree with both those plays. Anybody else here that we didn't mention?
A couple other options if you wanted to save. Those are the two I'm really focusing on. I do have some values I like though. I like Sam Darnold a lot. He's quietly been really good. He's scored at least 20 DraftKings points in every game. He's on the flip side of that Dallas game. The Dallas defense looked really good the other day, but Hurts still scored over 20. They're allowing 331 yards through the air. You've got no McCaffrey. To me, that's going to put a little bit more on Darnold's shoulder. And I like Sam Darnold quite a bit. I don't know that it makes sense to play him when, again, you got Jalen Hurts just a couple hundred more. But, if you can't stand your builds paying up, I do like a Sam Darnold. And I also like Taylor Heineke for Washington against Atlanta. Atlanta's allowing 31.3 points per game. He's been surprisingly good too. If you look at his log, he came in halfway through that first game, so you kind of throw that game out in terms of his DK points. But he's been right around 20 the other 2 weeks. Gets Curtis Samuel back, which we'll talk about. That gives them another weapon. Antonio Gibson appears to be rounding back into form. There's some decent players on this offense. Logan Thomas is a good player. So there are some options I like. Probably more GPP with those guys. I think Josh Allen and Hurts are going to be the two main guys that see the ownership this week. But again, if you're just like, man, I cannot stand my builds, those are some value plays that I don't mind.
What about I have a question for you on at least on the DraftKings side, and this is not a homer play. I'm just genuinely asking. What about Jimmy G at 5,600? Because he's lower than all three of the guys. Oh, look at Miz with the thumbs up.
Yeah, no, I mean, San Fran's got a nice total. Seattle defense is the worst defense in the league right now in terms of numbers. 440.3 total yards per game, 155 of that on the ground. Well, San Fran doesn't have much of a running game right now. So yeah, I like Jimmy. I actually have Jimmy in my 4 p.m. slate quarterback right now. He's going to come in really, really low owned. So a little bit of a risk there, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. He's in a really good spot.
And typically speaking, when you mention Niners or Seahawks, your brain kind of goes towards the defensive side, right? Like,
Yeah,
two teams, good defenses. But the defense on the Niners is very banged up, at least in the secondary. And as you just mentioned, the Seahawks defense is not the same. So that game could be a sneaky shootout. It's on the late slate. People might just be off of them in general in that game. I'm sure we may touch on this in a little bit with Miz in the GPP section, but just throwing it out there.
No, he's been decent. He's 18, 19, and 16 fantasy wise. But at that price, I think
but you're paying 56 for him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not like you're paying
20
and putting that up.
This is the game that I could see him get 20. So especially in the late slate, I definitely, like I said, Jimmy is my late quarterback.
All right, cool. Yeah, let's roll over into running back here. It seems, I was doing some builds this morning, and I just really couldn't land on anything outside of Derrick Henry, and I don't know if that's where you're going, or I tried to avoid him, especially at that price tag. But yeah, what do you think here?
So this is a site specific for me. Derrick Henry on DraftKings, fire him up. He's going to be chalky. They're missing their two best receivers. It's going to be a Derrick Henry game. I would expect, probably close to 30 rush attempts from Derrick Henry today, if not more.
And even if it's not a Derrick Henry day, what is the? I don't have the sheet in front of me. What does your sheet say about his ownership projections here?
He is projecting highest on DraftKings, third highest on FanDuel. I think he'll be highest by a large margin on DraftKings because it is pretty easy to get him in because we have some punts on the board, which we'll get to, at receiver, at tight end, at defense, which allows you to get a Derrick Henry and a stud receiver and a stud quarterback, pretty easily. So I think on DraftKings, you just fire up Derrick Henry and move on. On FanDuel, he is very, very expensive. And anybody who's tried to build on FanDuel today has already probably said, holy crap, this is hard. I don't think you have to jam him in on FanDuel. That's a really big price tag. 10-2, he's going to have to be a monster. I would rather play, our guy Cooper Kupp at 8-6 than a Derrick Henry at 10-2. But DraftKings, yes. So over on FanDuel, you have Alvin Kamara comes in at 9K. So that's a big savings off of Derrick Henry. You also have Aaron Jones is one of those pricing plays. He's only 7-4 on FanDuel, which is actually cheaper than his DraftKings price. There are very few FanDuel pricing plays today. That is one of them. And then Chuba Hubbard is looking like a very, very chalk play on FanDuel. He's actually the highest projected of any running back on either site for FanDuel. He's at 23%, which is the highest.
Yeah, I noticed you also have David Montgomery up there. I had my eye on him as I was looking through some stuff. Although that Matt Nagy offense looks great.
Yeah.
What do you think about Montgomery here?
So David Montgomery's I think we're going to see Derrick Henry, David Montgomery going to be very chalky on DraftKings. David Montgomery, again, this is one of those pricing plays. He's 7-5 on FanDuel. He's only 5-8 on DraftKings. So it's kind of what we saw with Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week, where he was very cheap, especially compared to FanDuel. One of those massive pricing discrepancies between the two sites that's typically going to drive ownership because it kind of points to a misprice of sorts. Now, David Montgomery has not been great, which has been, mainly on Matt Nagy. But this is a really good matchup. Detroit's allowing 31.7 real points per game. They're allowing 27.9 DraftKings points per game to opposing running backs. And in Chicago's case, David Montgomery is the workhorse here. And there is no way any coach who's coaching for his job doesn't make drastic changes compared to what they did last week. So I would expect much different offense this week. I did some reading, and the offense coordinator came out and said, yeah, our game plan was terrible. We're going to adjust. So I would expect rollouts.
Nope. No shit, your game plan was terrible.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Shocker. So I would expect a much, much different game plan. This is a much better matchup. And I would expect David Montgomery to get plenty of touches. So yes, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, DraftKings, I would expect to be pretty popular combo.
And then before we move on to wide receiver, do I see Mike Davis on that list? We trusting Mike Davis in cash, or
Mike Davis is a FanDuel play that I like quite a bit at 5-4.
Okay.
And actually, don't sleep on Trey Sermon. Again, that same matchup. Seattle's allowing 155 yards per game on the ground. Mitchell's been rolled out, putting Trey Sermon in the lead back spot. He was not great last week, but he did score a touchdown. And as long as he's going to be the lead horse here, that's a really good spot. So I like Mike Davis on FanDuel at 5-4, whereas Sermon is 5-9 on DraftKings. Give me the 500 savings in Mike Davis. Mike Davis, it's been a slow start, but he's still playing over 60% of the snaps to start the year. So that's good. That's what we want to see. He's on the field a lot. He's getting opportunities. Now he gets a good matchup. Surprisingly, Washington defense has been just dreadful. They're giving up 432 yards. They're the second worst defense.
Yeah, they seem to have fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, it's really weird. They're terrible. Miz is actually going to get into that game a little bit more, so I'll leave that for him. But yeah, I like Mike Davis on FanDuel. I like Trey Sermon on DraftKings. Trey Sermon's actually climbing this morning ownership wise. So if you end up needing some salary savings, DraftKings 5K in an elite matchup, it makes sense for Trey Sermon.
Yeah, you got to free up some salary somewhere,
Yeah.
obviously. So some of the plays you're picking aren't going to feel, you're not going to feel great about, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, this is a week where you're gonna have some salaries. You're gonna have to take some punts or some big values.
Yep. All right, let's move over into wide receiver here. You mentioned him before, but obviously we love our guy Cooper Kupp. But there's also a ton of other great value. I love this mid-6 range this week for the wide receiver.
Loaded, absolutely loaded. My favorite of the group is DJ Moore. It's been fantastic this year. We talked about it on the show before the show. What I really like to see is consistency for one, and then even better if a guy's trending up. Awesome. That's what DJ Moore's been. Every week's gotten a little bit better as he gets more comfortable with Sam Darnold. He's the clear number one. It's not, I mean, Robbie Anderson's barely involved. It is the, DJ Moore show by a mile. His targets have gone up every week. His yardage has gone up. Now we added some touchdowns in there. I got his first touchdown last week. Really like DJ Moore, especially on DraftKings where he's 6'6". We also have Amari Cooper. Big pricing discrepancy between FanDuel and DraftKings where he comes in $1,600 cheaper. So that's probably going to drive some ownership. Again, my only fear is what we talked about earlier. If Carolina sells out to stop the passing game, then like we saw the other day, Cooper may not be that involved. But the price does make a ton of sense. CeeDee Lamb, of course, another 6 range. Deebo Samuel is a play I really like on FanDuel, especially where he's 6'9". It's the Seattle defense. We've already talked about it. They're really bad. I know you're a big Deebo guy. I really like that price. Then we also have Robert Woods, still waiting on him to explode.
I know that Robert Woods number keeps getting lower and lower. I feel like it's jumping off the sheets at me, but I feel like it's also like prime for a sucker bet, right? You see it and you're like, oh man, he drops like a 5-point game.
The sites are daring us to play him. I bet you he doesn't see a ton of ownership though, because he just hasn't been good. But get exposure to him at least in a GPP because eventually he's gonna go nuts.
GPP. I'm definitely throwing him in at least a couple of my mixes for sure.
Yeah. So a couple FanDuel pricing plays. Odell is definitely a FanDuel pricing play. Calvin Ridley. Again, Miz is going to get into that game a little bit. Terry McLaurin's another pricing play on FanDuel. I mentioned Deebo. I expect Deebo to be very popular on FanDuel. I expect Cooper Kupp to be very popular on DraftKings, where he's 7'8" compared to 8'6" on FanDuel. Of course, you have Devontae Adams, so that's a decision you'll have to make on DraftKings. Do you like Kupp or Adams more? Personally, Kupp's my dude, so I'm going to lean Kupp. But both have been phenomenal. Both are averaging over 11 or more targets a game. Both are averaging over 100 yards a game. So, good spot for both. And then I want to mention 2 punts. Of course, we got the Tennessee situation, or actually we'll make it 3 punts. Got the Tennessee situation with missing the top 2 receivers. So Nick Westbrook-Ikine is going to be the popular punt. You could also throw Chester Rogers in there for Tennessee.
Yep.
It's a good matchup against the Jets. The question is, do you trust them? This is technically like a 3rd and 4th receiver. But Tennessee's got a decent total. It makes sense. 3,200's on DraftKings. That's a punt play that's essentially looking at a number 1 role. So that makes absolute sense. You also have, this is a bit of a homer pick, but he is projected ownership. Curtis Samuel. We talked about Curtis Samuel week 1 of the show before the show. His numbers to end the season last year were quietly like top 5 of any receiver. This dude's stud. First game all season, and he's only $3K on DraftKings. Now, the only concern there is we don't know his workload. They could ease him in. He could play only half the snaps. He could play a full workload. We don't know. So there's a little bit of risk there. But I do like Curtis Samuel. The talent level for 3K is nuts. So he is there as well. And
we loved Curtis Samuel last year. I mean, I dropped that stat week 1 when we were doing the show before the show. Like, he was up there in terms of top 10 plays just as much as Justin Jefferson last year, who everybody remembers had a breakout year. Like, Curtis Samuel is good.
Very good. Yeah.
He's good, and he does it all too. Like, right, he can kind of be in the backfield. He could do a couple screen passes. He could go deep. We love Curtis Samuel on this show. I don't know if I'm getting to him just yet because he's coming off of that, that injury, but I definitely don't see why you wouldn't be inclined to look his way as we get more into the season here.
Yeah, I think I mean, like I said, right now I have him. I do have him in cash, but again, that's a bit of a homer play. Westbrook, Akeen's probably a little bit safer for 200 more.
But again, at 3K, it's not going to sink your lineup.
Even if he plays half the snaps, the upside he has, I think absolutely puts him in play. And then one last play just for Miz, but he's actually, as much as Miz hates him, I'm actually a fan. Corey Davis.
Oh man, you guys on the stream can't see Miz off camera, but he's not happy.
Listen, I get it.
I wrote him up.
Especially on FanDuel here, though. He's only 5'7". He's the clear number one for this team. He gets a good matchup. Tennessee defense is not good. They're allowing a ton of points to opposing wide receiver groups, 51.1 to be exact. That's a lot. It's one of the bigger numbers. A little bit of revenge here. Good matchup. Don't sleep on Corey Davis, especially in GPPs. And I do like him for FanDuel cash as well, but he will come in pretty low owned. So a little bit of a risk play there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's jump into tight ends. Who do we like this week? I know there's a couple of low price guys, given all the injuries, that may get some looks. What are we thinking here?
Yep. On FanDuel, it's Travis Kelce. Lock him in, move on. He's going to be chalky. He always is. Incredibly consistent. You could pencil him in for 20 points, 100 yards, touchdown, essentially every week. We've talked about the Chiefs. They need to win this game. Look for Kelce to do his thing. And said it's a tough build this week, but Kelce is one of the plays I expect to be very, very popular. Over on DraftKings, much tougher to get him in. You'd have to sacrifice Derrick Henry, and I'm not sure that makes sense on DraftKings, with Derrick Henry being very affordable and in a smash spot. So I think that we're going to see a lot of people take a punt on DraftKings with a couple options. You got Dalton Schultz, who had a monster game last week. You got Evan Ingram, who has all the talent in the world, but, it's Evan Ingram. And then you have a true punt option in Will Dissly for Seattle. Gerald Everett has been ruled out, should put Dissly on the field a lot more. Just 2-6 opportunity play for near minimum price. It makes for a solid option. So that kind of gives you, 2-6, some 3K range plays. George Kittle would be kind of your mid-range play. I can't imagine many people will play him. And Travis Kelce is your pay-up guy.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're looking at the list here that we have on the screen, obviously Travis Kelce, I don't really have to touch on him. We're going to say his name every week, unless they're maybe even in the bye weeks as a punt.
He's wide receiver one is what he is.
But Kittle, Dissly, Schultz, those games are games like where the game scripts can play in their favor. Dissly at 2,600. I mean, Everett's out. Everett's out with COVID, right? Is that what it was? Yeah. So, I mean, you're plugging him in, not because you think he's going to light the world on fire, just simply because he's starting. He's going to probably be part of that shootout style type of game. And all he could do is just get a couple of catches. He doesn't even have to score for it to pay off at 2-6. And then obviously Kittle we spoke about, and Schultz is another one. The Cowboys offense looks really good. The Cowboys in general look really good.
Yes, that offense.
Dak is spreading the love. It's not like he's targeting one guy. I mean, CeeDee Lamb looks pretty good, but there's a ton of people on that team that are generating catches and targets, and Schultz is one of those guys. So I'm on board with all these plays if you can fit them in.
One last sneaky. This is again more GPP play, but Dawson Knox for Buffalo's quietly having a good season. He's got a couple touchdowns on the year already. He's averaging 35.7 yards per game, which I know doesn't sound like a ton, but at 3.6, if you look at his log, it's been pretty good. GPP, pivot away from those other punt options.
Yeah. And as we wrap up this cash section, as always, do not let defense dictate your lineups, right? You're going to give us the old spiel that you normally do.
I'm going to do it every time. If you read my top plays article, I don't even write up any defenses because defense should not dictate your lineup. If you go say Buffalo's 5K on FanDuel, if you were to go and click Buffalo as your first play, you're making a mistake because that's going to take up a ton of salary. And it's not even a guarantee. They could shut out Houston, but not get any turnovers and not be worth that salary. It's not a lock that, a high price defense is going to deliver. So defense is the last position I ever fill out. You still want to get a defense that makes sense, that's logical. If you're stuck with a defense in a terrible spot facing the best offense in the league, then adjust. But again, don't plug in a defense wait for the end and adjust from there.
And honestly, like usually on these slates, the defense that breaks it is the one that has like the pick six or a bunch of turnovers. And it's like, you're not predicting that, it's just impossible.
Yeah. So a few I will mention though, Detroit, very logical play against Chicago. Again, I expect Chicago's game plan to be much, much better. They're not going to have one net passing yard, but they're probably going to give up some sacks. There's a chance that Detroit gets an interception. Just 2.2K on DraftKings makes sense. I also like the Jets. Again, they're going to give up some points. Derrick Henry is going to put up some big yards, but could be a chance for an interception due to the fact that maybe Tannehill's not on the same page with some of these wide receivers he's not used to. So the Jets at 2K and only 3K on FanDuel, pure punt option. That does make sense. You could that play has some merit behind it because of the situation. Those are really the punt options. And then of course your pay up options,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
If you get them in, fine. Maybe you probably, in my opinion, if you got salary to spare and your cash builds, maybe invest it somewhere else, not on the defensive side. But
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Dev. We'll come back to you in a second here when we summarize some of your plays. Let's move over to the one and only Miz, talk about some stacks that he likes this week in GPPs and maybe some other one-offs that we've been targeting. What's up, Miz? Miz, you're on mute. Welcome to the show, bro.
Yeah, first time caller, GPPs today, it's a good week for GPPs just because of how tight pricing is. So focusing your play around the games that you want to invest in is going to be your best bet, especially to uncover value. The first one I had written down was the Vikings stack along with Odell on the way back. And you could even use Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb, depending on how you think the game is going to play out. But I wrote up those guys because, number one, Anthony Barr is out for the Vikings. So the Browns should be able to at least run the ball or not have as much to worry about over the middle of the field, with Odell doing all the crossing patterns that he loves to do, so on and so forth. So they should be able to put up points in this one, therefore leading the Vikings out of their comfort zone, which is also running the ball, to being more aggressive, which they have been all season long. Now, I want to pair Jefferson and Thielen together, but you don't necessarily have to do that. But I just know that those guys are going to have the majority of the targets, right? So it's a lot easier if you wanted to invest in a game when you kind of know or have a, don't know for sure, but have the best idea of where the target's going to go. And the targets are mainly focused on these two guys. So pairing Cousins up with those two, with Odell or Kareem Hunt or Chubb even, is a good bet to just bet on that environment and for them to go over the total on both sides.
Yeah, and on our Wednesday show that we do, we always take a look back at the winning cash lineups and the winning GPP lineups, and there's usually an overlaying theme with the GPP winners, right? And that's usually the game stacks, and it's always something like you said, somewhat like an onslaught, quarterback, wide receiver, running back combination, run it back with a receiver on the opposing team, or even a running back on the opposing team. These type of games is what you want to target. And I'm noticing a trend with you in general, like you like the Vikings as a stackable option. And that's kind of just a testament to Kirk Cousins and how he's kind of flying under the radar this year. He's playing sneaky good, airing it out. His receivers are playing really well. He's got a great passer rating on the year. He's just playing good.
Yeah, and they've just been more aggressive. I don't know if it's just due to how the chips have fallen, or if that's what they're really trying to do. I guess we'll see over here for the next few weeks. But everybody loves to shit on Kirk Cousins, but he loves to throw it in her face once he has a big game.
Yeah, if I had a soundbite for you like that, I'd play it right now, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll move into our next stack here. It looks like you're targeting the Falcons and not the Redskins, the Washington football game.
This is not for the faint of heart at all, right? I've actually recommended them a few times now, and they look like ass. However, so do the football team's defense, or so does rather. They are getting completely shredded on the back end. The pass rush hasn't been what anybody expected. It's been decent, but not, lights out, like a lot of folks thought coming into the year. And again, we know where the targets are going in this offense. It's going to be Calvin Ridley, and it's going to be Kyle Pitts, and then to a lesser extent, for some reason, Cordero Patterson, and then Mike Davis. On the other side, Atlanta's defense is also really bad. Even though they have Dean Pease, it takes a long time for his defenses to usually come together. Usually by like week 7 or 8 is when he starts to see an improvement when he first comes into an organization. So, obviously it could be sooner, but I expect Antonio Gibson to be able to churn out a ton of yards on the ground, also catching the ball. And then we already talked about Curtis Samuel over the middle, and then Terry McLaurin all over the field. Tyler Heineke is not he's definitely not the worst quarterback in the league. He's definitely, I would say, above a backup. If he continues to improve, he could actually maybe keep that job for the entire season. But they should be able to put up points, therefore leading Falcons in some passing situations as well. Kyle Pitts has been used all over the field. I don't know if this is probably not a secret, but he's been used all over the field. He just hasn't broken out yet, but it's coming, and it's extremely similar to when Darren Waller was his breakout year. It took a few games for him to really explode. And the fact that he's just not lining up at the tight end position. He's lining up out wide. He's lining up in the slot. They're designing plays for him. I think he's the best play in the tight end position today. Because his ownership just keeps going down. He has
That's great.
All
the
the
perfect
all the
storm
upside
for us. Yeah.
Right. He has all the upside you could ever want. The lower ownership and the leverage on the scrub tight ends and the big boys. And then if you put Calvin Ridley in there, with Matt Ryan is dirt cheap. You can pretty much do a lot more things than when you're looking at your cash build and how tight the pricing is. So it really opens up a lot, and I think this game is one to kind of go under the radar and overlooked by a lot of people just because it's been so bad. But you gotta kind of forget about that and just focus it on this individual game and see what happens.
God, the amount of times that Matt Ryan has ruined my weekend for
dozens,
for various reasons, fantasy, betting,
gambling,
DFS. It's just, and it's not even like on one side or the other. It's like I'm fading him and he blows up, or I go against him and he blows up, or I put everything on him and then he goes the other way and shits the bed. Yeah, so, Matt Ryan is just a true enigma. So
it's terrible.
Whatever. Well, I'm all for it though. I like all your reasoning and your meaning behind why you're picking these guys is something I can get on board with. I just, like you said, it's not going to feel right, but like both these teams, their defenses suck. So If you can sneak some low ownership plays in there and get some nice points out of it, you're certainly putting yourself ahead of the pack and in a spot to win a tournament. Any other games or one-offs that you're targeting here? Me and Dev brought up the Seattle Niners game.
Yep. You should always be targeting the Seattle games moving forward. Their defense is so bad, but their offense is good. So that's always a recipe for a over and a shootout. So you should always be targeting those games. I think that's a good low on stack. You can definitely make a lot of things work with that, with Jimmy G being super cheap. Sherman's supposed to tout the rock in the beginning of at least in the beginning of the game. Shanahan said he made a ton of improvement in practice, like blah, blah, blah. Even though I love Sherman. But then just make sure you're bringing it back. Bring it back with Metcalf and maybe somebody you can maybe use Disley too.
Dude, the Niners secondary is banged up right now. And you saw what Devontae Adams did to them last week. On the most important drive of the game was just wide open. I don't see that stopping this week when you have guys like Metcalf and Lockett on the other side. Lockett was a little banged up last week, but he is playing. So he's certainly viable too if you can't get the DK on a run back. But it's definitely an interesting game to look at. And I don't know why. It's not like a rule of thumb by any means. Those later games tend to drive less ownership in general because I feel like everybody puts a lot of faith in like the opening 1 o'clock games. And if you can pivot to these guys, if your games aren't going the way you hope, that's a nice game to pivot to.
I couldn't agree more. That's what you should be doing, especially if your lineup starts to tank at the beginning. Get crazy with the late swap.
Yep. Anybody else? Any one-offs that aren't stack related that you're targeting here? Anybody else? One-offs that aren't.
Well, I think just using Darrell Henderson is a good leverage play off of all the concentrated ownership on the Rams receivers, right? Everybody loves Kupp. Everybody wants to use Woods and catch his breakout. Everybody likes Higbee because he's mid-priced. But that's not to say that they couldn't run 3 touchdowns in today. So we're betting on the environment in that game with the high total and the touchdowns going elsewhere. Along with in that same game, Chase Edmonds, ton of yak allowed by the Rams, even though they're hard to throw on for sure. But if you can complete a pass, they don't really do a good job of tackling. And Steph Diggs, I mean, this game's coming. I mean, it's likely going to be today just because of the opponent, but this big game,
they're 17, basically 17-point favorites. So expect them to definitely get out early and often on that line. So.
And then I like Will Fuller as a deep GPP flyer. Colts secondary, not very good. I know it's Brissett, but also Brissett revenge game. Hollywood Brown bounce back game. I talked about Pitts being the best tight end play on the board. And then the Ravens were +1 earlier this week, which is not, the line has now moved to -1. Thank you very much. And the Broncos are going to be out with their down 2 linemen. So Ravens defense, they're off COVID list. So Justin Houston will be coming for him. Odafe Owe will be coming for him. And maybe we'll see a Deshaun Elliott touch or interception.
All in on the Ravens, huh? As you deliver that message from the Baltimore Inner Harbor there.
That's right.
All right, let's bring Dev back here and just recap some of the plays for everybody in case you're just tuning in. Welcome back, Dev. So talking about these cash plays, it sounds like on the quarterback side, we were high on Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. Dak Prescott got mentioned, and then we did talk if you want to get a little bit cheaper, look Sam Darnold's way, and then if you really want to get ballsy, Jimmy Garoppolo. Sound about right?
Yep. And as Miz mentioned, I like Heineke as well. Yeah, and I do want to throw a GBP play in there really quick. Sticking with Miami, Jalen Waddle is another play to have on your radar.
And then on the running back side, seems like it's going to be Derrick Henry here.
Definitely on DraftKings.
Definitely a DraftKings play. On the FanDuel side, you like Aaron Jones and his price. We also mentioned Nick Chubb there as well. Oh, no, not Nick Chubb. I'm sorry. No tier. Chubb Hubbard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't jam in Jones. I'm not sure he's going to be uber chalky, but if you end up in a kind of a goofy pricing range, he is a nice price. Mike Davis is probably my favorite value running back on FanDuel as well.
Yep. And going back over to the wide receiver front, as a punt option, we mentioned Chester Rogers. That's for an obvious reason, the Julio and the AJ Brown injury. Tannehill's got to throw it to somebody. I think this is Fertzer, the tight end, his first game back in a while, I believe. I don't think he played last week, but regardless of all that, Chester Rogers on the wide receiver side. We love DJ Moore. We always love Cooper Kupp. That's a name that we'll always say. And we also like Deebo Samuel, I think, on the FanDuel side you mentioned.
Yep, Deebo's got a nice FanDuel price. Yeah, Kupp, DJ Moore, couple punt options at receiver. So, which actually, we talked about Curtis Samuel. He is actually now fallen ownership wise, and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is the most popular projected punt play at wide receiver.
And then on the tight end side, as always, Kelsey, par for the course. But we also do like Kittle this week. If you can get to that number, it is a little bit of a high range. People tend to punt on the tight end side. And if you are doing that, maybe look towards Will Dissly. And you said this is more a GPP play, but you did say you like Devin Knox also as a sneaky play.
Yep, Knox is a sneaky play. And then I love the Pitts play for all the reasons that Miz mentioned as well.
Yep. And then bouncing over to Miz on the GPP side, like the Viking stack with the run back of the Browns. So we're targeting there, Cousins and one or two of his receivers in Jefferson or Thielen, run it back with OBJ and one of the Browns running backs. You can go either Hunt or Chubb, depending on the way you think that game's going to go. And then on the other game stack that we liked, it was the Falcons and the Washington football team. Matt Ryan, gross, but with Pitts and Calvin Ridley, and run it back with Antonio Gibson, who we also like. And to Devin's point, maybe you don't want to get to Curtis Samuel in a cash game, but maybe you put him in that stack and you run him back against the Falcons offense there and put him with Gibson for $3,000, and you really save yourself some salary. All right,
yep.
Let's jump into PrizePicks. If you guys don't know, PrizePicks is this pretty cool site that allows you to bet on not only prop bets, but fantasy scores as well as props. So you get a bunch of random things up there where you can take the over on somebody's catches, or you can take the over on somebody's fantasy points or output for a game. It's kind of a unique site that I haven't really seen anywhere else. We have a deal with them. You signed up now with code YFC. Guys, anything on the PrizePicks front that you like?
Yeah, there's again, I talked about last week, a lot of these plays that we're talking about for DFS wise, you can double down and utilize on PrizePicks, assuming their, props make sense. So, Antonio Gibson, for instance, talked about him, his props only half a touchdown. So, you like the over there. There's a couple, especially the touchdowns. There's a couple touchdown props that we can really take advantage of. Cooper Kupp's been a touchdown machine. His props only half a touchdown. I like the over there. Justin Jefferson's only half touchdown. Again, has missed touchdown. Like the over there. So I definitely liking some of these touchdown props.
Miz, anything for you on the PrizePicks side?
Yeah, you can also do their fantasy score, which I would like to go with Odell over 13 points. That seems pretty easy, which, take it for what it's worth. Corey Davis is at 12, and that's pushing it. I actually like his teammate Crowder at 9 to go over that. And then I had one more here. Where is it? Oh, Chase Edmonds over 13.
And keep in mind, guys, as we talk about these PrizePicks plays, they are really good and sharp with updating these numbers. These numbers that we're talking about right now, about an hour before game time, do have the possibility of changing. These numbers are, I guess they go with the public, and PrizePicks tends to skew them a little bit. So if you do want to play PrizePicks, it's in your best interest to get them in early because those numbers are usually more favorable to you. As like I said, they do change. Sticking with the theme of Vegas here, let's bounce over and recap some of our picks from the last week. Last week was a tough one for me. I went 0-3 in my picks. Dev and Miz actually both went 3-0. That brings our total records to, I think, 4-5 for me and 5-4 for the two of you. So we got the Vegas odds up here, and you know what? If you don't like to gamble, that's totally fine. But these odds are actually taken off of Devin's cash play article. And you'll notice that there's a column there for implied totals. And that's honestly one of the first things I target when I'm making my lineups. I tend to, everybody's a little different, but I tend to highlight numbers above 25 because that's just a strong implied total for that specific team. And those are the teams you want to build around, right? Somebody's got a 19-point game total, like maybe the Detroit Lions, maybe you stay away from them for a little bit, maybe you don't go all in on them. But usually the way DFS works is, it favors the Vegas lines. The games that are supposed to go over 55 points or more tend to be the ones that people draw interest on. And that's just something just to throw out there when you're making these lineups. Let's take a look at some of your picks. Dev, you want to run it by us while I fix this camera feed?
Oh, you're gonna make me try to remember. I believe I had the Browns.
Do you remember?
I believe I had the Browns because I'm a homer and I pick the Browns every week. And I've picked against Matt Nagy every week, so I believe I have Detroit.
Yeah, I was gonna say you do have Detroit +3.
Yeah, Detroit, and then boy, what was my last one? Do you have my last one?
I do have them here. So you have Cleveland -2 against Minnesota. You have Detroit +3 against Chicago, and you have Washington -1.5 against Atlanta there.
That's right. Yeah, because I'm can't help my homer. That's the team that has Chase Young, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel. So that's a homer pick as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing some teams here, like you said, anti-Nagy, which I think everybody in the league is at this point. He's the new Adam Gase, right? Anti-Nagy, all in on the Browns.
In my Buckeyes.
Yeah, and anybody who played for the Ohio State Buckeyes. So
yeah, pretty much.
Hey, you got a system. If the system works, I guess just stick to it, right?
Doing okay so far. So
yeah. Miz, why don't we jump into your picks? Do you remember them, or do you need me to read them off to you here?
One was Baltimore at +1. The line is now moved to -1. Last time I looked this morning.
Yes, that is correct.
And I don't remember them.
Okay. Well, you had here, let's see. You had Seattle +3 because you're a loser. And you want to give free money away. And you had Philadelphia +7. I don't know if that line stayed at 7 though, but against the Chiefs.
Well, that's horrible line now because Lane Johnson's now out, so that means 4 of their starting linemen are out. So that's not good.
Yeah. So well, you locked it in on Wednesday, so we're holding you to it. And then on my front, I had Carolina +4.5 against the Cowboys. That was probably my least favorite pick. But I'm sticking with it. I also had Baltimore. There was some Lamar Jackson news, by the way. He is going to play. That's correct, right? He has a back injury. Yeah. I figured
He's
so,
playing.
but I didn't know if it was news or noise, as they say. And I also had Tampa Bay -7 at New England. I think they stomped Bill Belichick and the Patriots at home. So we'll see there. So yeah, recap real quick. Miz likes Philly +7, which will probably lose. Seattle +3, which will probably lose, and Baltimore +1. Devin
Neutral
likes the
power
Browns. Devin likes the Browns -2, Washington -1.5, Detroit +3, and I like the Panthers +4.5, Baltimore +1, and Tampa Bay -7. Looking at the chat here, I don't really see too much. Well, I mean, I see a bunch, but it's mostly just noise and trolling. Shout out to our haters. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything here. We got everything in that we need to talk about. Guys, any closing remarks before we get everybody out of here at the noon mark?
No, I mean, you guys, if you watch the show, you know my thing with DFS, especially NFL Sundays. Tinker, don't get overly locked on, have your core plays, but then be a little bit flexible and find that lineup you love. Because if you have to tinker a little bit, that's just fine.
Miz,
any closing?
No, just it's a tough week, so just try to focus your builds, try to get them as tight as possible, build around the games that you like, and go from there.
All right, sounds good. Well, we're letting you go here with over an hour or just under an hour left to finish those builds, get those lineups nice and primed, ready to take down a week 4 slate. Somebody mentioned in the chat, who am I? I'm the host, and these guys are the experts. We will talk to you next week. Be sure to jump in for our show before the show, which airs on Fridays. And then we get you ready for, obviously, the following week on Sunday for next week's show, week 5. So take care, everybody. Best of luck, and we will see you in the Discord. Peace out.